Maya never broke rules. She never arrived late or answered back or forgot a single protocol. She memorized the safety manual the way other people remembered love songs. She flew for 6 straight years with not a single complaint, not one bad report. And still she remained stuck in economy serving juice boxes and elbow room for thankless passengers who forgot her name before landing. That morning she put on her uniform with the kind of hope she hadn't felt in months. The gold wings on her chest, straight, the scarf tied just right, and her shoes polished like mirrors. She had finally been rotated to first class for an international route headed to Dubai, the kind of flight where people with names that moved markets sat in silence behind sunglasses and paid more for legroom than she made in a week. She told herself this could be at the shift that changes everything. Maybe she would get noticed. Maybe someone would speak her name to the right person at the right time. She smiled at passengers as they boarded her service, crisp, her posture tall, and then he stepped in, a man with no sound in his step, wearing a grey suit with sharp lines and a face that didn't need to smile to be remembered. His ticket said 2A, and his watch flashed under the cabin lights in a way that made Maya's breath catch. He did not speak, just nodded once, took his seat, and opened a book. Yes, a book, no phone, no headphones, just pages and paper and presents. She greeted him with calm grace, and he did not respond, and yet she found herself lingering longer than necessary. The other crew members barely noticed, but she felt it the way time slowed when she walked past him, the way her hands smoothed the tray just a little more when she placed his drink. She knew this was not standard, but it was not wrong, not yet. She was being attentive, that was all. When he finally looked up, his eyes met hers for a second longer than polite, and said thank you, not like a man thanking a flight attendant, but like someone acknowledging something already understood. And in that moment, Maya felt something shift, something small and silent, like the cabin air before turbulence. She continued her duties with care, but her focus pulled again and again to 2, not just because of who he might be, but because of what he made her feel, seen, not just looked at, appreciated, not just served. And it had been a long time since anyone made her feel like more than a uniform and a tray. She had no idea that someone else was watching, not the man in 2A, but another passenger, 2 rows back, someone with sharp eyes and a quiet phone camera, and a memory trained to notice every detail. She had no idea that this flight, the one she thought might change her life, would do exactly that. Just not the way she expected. Maya kept checking the cabin, though not in a way that would raise concern. Her steps soft, her hands steady, her service flawless. She moved through first class like she belonged, and for the first time in years she actually felt like she did every time she passed. Her chest tightened, not from nerves, but from something harder to define, something she had not allowed herself to feel in this uniform in a very long time. He sat quietly reading, occasionally glancing out the window as the clouds shifted below them like mountains made of air. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the sky outside turned golden with the soft spill of sunset. She offered him another drink this time. He looked up before she spoke, his eyes sharp, but not unkind. "Do you always treat passengers this well?" he asked, and his voice was calm, smooth, like someone who always got what he wanted without ever needing to raise it. Maya smiled, not too wide, just enough to say, "I notice you," without saying the words, "only the ones who sit in 2, as she replied with a soft laugh, and she felt the spark in her chest grow just a little brighter. He didn't laugh back, but he did smile a little, and turned a page in his book slowly, like he was considering something quietly, like he was watching her more than he let on. She walked away, but his presence stayed with her, followed her like perfume that lingered long after it was gone, and she didn't notice how long she stood near the front, how long she talked to him during routine checks, how many times she skipped checking rows that didn't wear suits or watches that glinted under soft cabin lights. What she did not see was the woman in 2C eyes, sharp behind thin glasses, silver hair tied in a bun spine, straight like someone who had worn the same uniform once years ago, and had not forgotten what it meant. The woman watched Maya with interest, watched the slight lean, the extra attention, the time spent at one seat far longer than policy, allowed she noticed how Maya missed a drink request from 4D and forgot to refill the water at 5, as she noticed how the other attendant covered without a word. Maya came back to 2 near the end of the flight, and he asked her one more question, this one softer, more private. "Have you ever thought about working privately?" She looked at him, her heart loud in her chest, and said quietly sometimes yes. He nodded slowly, said nothing else, and for a moment Maya imagined her life different. No carts, no cramped kitchens, just private jets, and perfect silence with men like this offering jobs with quiet questions. She didn't know that 2C had already opened her phone, had already begun typing a message to the airline feedback line, and had already attached a single short video clip with a note saying, "Please review the conduct of this crew member for potential breach of service." Maya smiled as she walked away, still unaware, still dreaming, still thinking the flight was hers. The cabin lights were dim now, and most passengers had drifted into the quiet hum of sleep or low conversations, and Maya moved like she was floating, calm, efficient, glowing from the inside out, because the man in 2A had spoken to her not once but twice, and it wasn't just about peanuts or pillows, it was something else, something that felt like possibility, like change, like maybe this uniform could open more than airplane doors. He had closed his book and tucked it into the seat pocket, and now he looked ahead at nothing in particular, but Maya felt like he was still watching her, even when he wasn't, and it made her step lighter, her smile softer. And for the first time in years, she felt seen, not just noticed, but seen. She brought him a cup of warm water without him asking, with a slice of lemon, and he looked at her and said, thoughtful. She smiled and said, "Sometimes I can guess what people want before they ask," and he looked impressed, and she took that in like sunshine. But 2 rows behind him, the woman in 2C was still watching, eyes unblinking, hands folded, phone resting on her tray table, camera already open, though not recording just yet, not needing to, because everything was being recorded anyway, by habit, by memory, by someone who used to wear the same scarf, the same badge, someone who remembered when professionalism was a kind of armor, and now she watched a young woman lowering it piece by piece. Maya leaned against the wall near the galley, stealing a moment to check her lipstick in her phone camera, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to, because she felt something tonight, and it had been so long since she felt anything other than tired. One of the junior attendants whispered to her, "Hey, table 4D is asking about that drink you forgot." Maya blinked, surprised for a moment. "Oh, right, sorry, I'll go," and she did. But she rushed it and came right back to the front, and the woman in 2C noticed that too. She noticed how Maya hovered by 2, how she laughed quietly, how she didn't check row 5 for turbulence belts during the announcement, how she seemed to float around one man as if gravity had changed for her alone. And then it happened, subtle, simple, quiet. The man in 2 pulled a business card from his wallet and placed it upside down on his tray table, and said, "If you ever get tired of this life, give that number a call." Maya looked at the card like it was a secret, like it had weight, like it could open a door no one else had shown her, and her fingers touched it like it might vanish if she blinked too long. She didn't see the slight shake of the head from 2C, the soft sigh the woman gave as she finally hit record. Just a few seconds, that's all she needed, just enough to show the line being crossed. The smile, the carb, the lean, the rules forgotten in the glow of attention. And Maya still thought she was winning. Maya stood near the galley with the card still in her hand, staring at the name printed in raised letters, Adrian Holt. She had heard the name before somewhere, maybe in a news segment, maybe whispered by another flight crew. Someone had once said he only flies commercial when he wants to be seen, wants to feel normal for a few hours. She turned the card over once, then twice, thinking maybe this was what she had been waiting for all these years. Not a promotion, not a compliment from her manager, but an exit, a door held open by someone who could pull her into another world. The man in 2A was still quiet, sipping water, reading again, but now she saw him differently, not as a passenger, not even as a flirtation, but as an opportunity, and that thought made her heartbeat change. She tucked the card into the inside pocket of her blazer and returned to the aisle just in time to catch a supervisor from economy entering first class. Doing a routine check, his eyes scanned the cabin, briefly nodded at her, and moved on. He didn't say anything, but for the first time that night, she felt suddenly aware of herself, how long she had been near to, how little attention she'd given to the rest of the cabin. And behind her 2C watched, still silent, still recording, in pieces, nothing dramatic, just fragments, just enough to tell a story. Maya continued her service, helping passengers with dinner trays, asking about comfort levels, refilling a glass here and there, but her focus stayed near the front. Her body moved through her duties, but her mind was circling one question. Was he serious? Would he actually offer her something beyond this plane, this uniform, this shift? After the meal service was done, she returned to him, almost casually offered coffee. He declined, then looked at her and asked, "What do you really want, Maya?" And for a moment she didn't know what to say. The question was too big, too open. She said something light, something safe. "To feel like I'm doing more than passing out drinks." He nodded slowly, like he understood. And maybe he did. Maybe that was the most dangerous part. He understood too well. She walked away from him again, but this time something felt off. The cabin was too quiet, the other crew members too busy, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was aware of the same moment that had just passed. She glanced over her shoulder toward 2C and saw the woman looking down at her phone calmly, like nothing unusual had happened. But Maya felt something in her gut shift, slightly like when turbulence starts before the captain says a word. Back in the galley, she pulled out the card again and stared at the number. At the way the light caught the ink, and she wondered if she would be stupid not to call, or stupid if she did. She didn't know yet that the decision was already being made for her. She didn't know yet that her name had already been flagged in a message sent quietly while she was serving coffee. And she had no idea that her final flight had already begun. Maya walked through the cabin with her posture perfect, her hair in place, her heart still caught somewhere between nerves and excitement. The card in her pocket felt heavier, now, like it meant more than it should, like it had weight beyond its paper and ink. She passed by 2A again, offered a gentle smile, and he returned it just slightly, just enough. And somehow that felt more valuable than anything she had earned in years. She told herself it was harmless, that nothing had happened, nothing was inappropriate, just conversation, just interest, just the kind of moment she deserved after all this time. But 2 rows behind her, 2C lowered her phone after another short clip and folded her arms across her chest, her expression unreadable. She reached for the flight attendant call button, pressed it once, then waited. Maya returned to the galley to restock a tray and found one of her fellow crew members waiting there, a little tense face unreadable. "Hey, the lead wants to see you," she said softly, now, like right now. Maya blinked, confused, thinking maybe it was something small, a paperwork check, a question about service. Maybe someone complained about food. She smoothed her jacket, checked her breath, and walked toward the front of the aircraft, where the lead supervisor stood near the cabin door, arms behind his back, eyes calm but serious. He asked her to step aside for a moment, said he needed to ask a few questions, standard protocol. "Have there been any unusual interactions with passengers today?" She shook her head too quickly. "Maybe no, nothing unusual." He asked again, this time a little slower. "Anything that might seem outside standard service, anything that could be misinterpreted?" And this time she hesitated, and that hesitation was enough to change the temperature in the room. He told her quietly that a passenger had filed a concern that a report had been submitted along with video clips. Her stomach dropped like sudden altitude loss. She felt the blood leave her face for just a second. "Who filed it?" she asked. "We can't say," he replied, "just that it came from first class, and that it included footage that raised questions." Her hands gripped the edge of the wall beside her, and for a moment she said nothing because she didn't know what to say, didn't know what had been seen or how it had been recorded. The supervisor told her to return to her position for now, but to remain available after landing for a formal conversation. She walked back down the aisle with the same steps she'd taken earlier, but now they felt heavier, slower, and she didn't meet anyone's eyes, not even 2A's. He looked up once as she passed, and gave her a small nod as if nothing had happened. But now it felt different, like the air between them had changed, like something had closed even if nothing had been said. She moved through the cabin trying to look calm, trying to look the way she always had, but something inside her had already started to crack. And the card in her pocket now felt more like a trap than a chance. Maya stood near the galley staring out at the closed curtain as if it could tell her something, as if it could show her what she had missed, what she had said or done that had turned something beautiful into something dangerous. She tried to replay it in her mind, the way she had smiled, the way he had smiled back, the way she leaned in just a little too far. It all felt innocent, it all felt natural. She had done less than some of the other girls had done before, and they never got in trouble, never even got warnings. But she also knew that it wasn't just about rules. It was about timing, about perception, about who was watching, and who was ready to speak up. The supervisor hadn't said much, just that she needed to remain available for follow-up after landing, and that the airline would be reviewing the report and attached footage. Footage, that word made her stomach turn over. She didn't know what they saw, what angle, what moment. She didn't know if they had captured her holding the card, or if it was her laughing too long, or standing too close, or maybe just looking too interested. And worse than not knowing was the silence. No one spoke to her now, not like before. Her co-workers were polite, but distant. Her routine check-ins were met with short nods, and even 2A had gone cold. He wasn't rude, but the air around him had changed. He didn't ask for anything else, he didn't look her way. It felt like someone had turned down the volume on her life. She walked the cabin slowly, checking belts, checking lights, but her mind was somewhere else, stuck in a loop that played again and again. She had only wanted to be seen, to be remembered, to be offered more. Was that so wrong? At one point she passed the woman in 2C again, and their eyes met for a brief second, and in that moment Maya knew it was her. She didn't have proof, not real proof, but she felt it like a sudden chill, and the woman didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't look away. She just blinked slowly and looked back down at her book. Maya returned to the galley, her heart sinking, her pulse in her ears louder than the engine. She reached into her pocket, felt the edge of the card again, and now it burned against her fingers. This wasn't a gift anymore. This wasn't an opportunity. It was evidence. She left it in her pocket and stood still for a moment, breathing quietly. The plane was beginning its descent. Soon the final cabin check would come, and then the landing, and then the conversation she was dreading. She didn't know what they would say or what they would show her. She didn't know if this was a warning or the end. But she knew something had closed around her, and it wasn't the seatbelt. The plane touched down with a soft bump, the kind Maya had always loved, smooth, clean, like a shift, ending the right way. And for a moment she let herself pretend everything was fine. She smiled through the final checks, helped a man with his bag, told a child to hold the handrail as they waited for the doors to open, but her hands were cold and her mouth dry. She stood near the door as passengers began to exit, nodding as they passed. Some said thank you, some didn't. And when the man from 2 stood, he looked at her once, nodded again, and left without a word. No smile, no message, no second glance. Just like that he was gone. She watched him disappear into the terminal, and something inside her cracked quietly, not loud, not sudden, just a slow folding in of something soft. A few moments later, the supervisor came to her not with anger, not even with a raised voice, just a calm expression and a navy folder in his hands. "We need to speak privately, Maya." She followed him to a quiet space off the gate, a small glass room with chairs and a table too bright to clean, and when he sat across from her, he opened the folder with slow, careful movements, like he didn't want to scare her, just show her. He slid a printed report across the table. It had her name at the top, date, flight number, and a heading that read Crew Conduct Concern. Then came the photos. Still images taken from video. Maya standing too close to seat 2A. Maya leaning in while other passengers waited. Maya smiling, holding a small card. The report listed times behavior, notes deviations from service protocol, and passenger complaint language. Allegations of favoritism, failure to respond to other guests' non-compliance with professional standards. Her hands began to shake. She tried to speak, to explain, to say it was just conversation, that she hadn't meant to ignore anyone, that it wasn't a violation. But the supervisor held up one hand and said quietly, "Maya, this isn't about what you meant, it's about how it looked." She went silent. Because she knew. He told her that for now she would be removed from flight rotation pending review, and that a formal investigation would be conducted by corporate. She asked what that meant, and he said calmly, "It means you're grounded until further notice." She sat there for a long moment, trying to breathe, trying to remember where this had started and how it had moved so fast, so quietly, trying to remember why she had smiled that much, or why she had let herself believe that the man in 2A had been offering anything more than a moment. She left the office with her badge in her hand, her uniform still perfect, but her career unraveling thread by thread. The terminal around her was busy, noisy, alive, but Maya walked through it like it was underwater. The folder stayed behind on the table, but the weight of it followed her all the way home. Maya sat on the edge of her bed in a room that had not changed since yesterday, but now felt smaller, quieter, colder. Her uniform still hung on the back of the chair, still pressed, still perfect, but it looked like it belonged to someone else. She held her badge in her hand for a long time, turning it slowly, fingers running along the edges, as if she could smooth out the last few days, make them disappear, turn the moment back. The phone had rung once earlier that morning, a short call from HR, polite, firm, professional. "We're placing your file under formal review. Pending further investigation, you are not to report to duty or wear company uniform until further notice." They said they would follow up within 10 business days. 10 business days. She stared at the number like it meant something like those days were a space she could still fix things inside. But she knew she couldn't. She hadn't told anyone, not her sister, not her mother, not even the friend she usually texted before landing. She didn't want to hear the words said out loud. Not yet. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out the card again, the one from 2, a smooth, glossy, the print still sharp, like it hadn't been in the middle of everything, like it hadn't become a symbol of a career slipping through her fingers. She thought about calling the number once just to see, just to ask. But she knew she wouldn't. She wasn't even sure if it was real anymore. Maybe the offer was never serious, maybe it was just charm or boredom, or maybe he did this often on flights where people were looking for something more than their job. She stood and crossed the room to her window, the city outside moving as always, buses, passing horns, and the distance, people going to work like nothing had changed. She pressed her forehead to the glass and thought about the 6 years she had given to the skies, the holidays missed, the sleep lost, the miles she had flown just to stay in place. And how it had all ended, not with a mistake, not with a crash, just a moment too long by a seat, just a smile too wide, just attention paid where it should not have lingered. There would be a file now with her name on it, a quiet mark, on a clean record, and maybe even if they let her back, she would never be trusted the same way again. She placed the card in her drawer, closed it slowly, walked back to the chair, and took down the uniform, folded it carefully, placed it in the garment bag, and zipped it up without a sound. For now it would hang in the closet, untouched, unseen, and she would wait, not for the job, but for the part of herself that used to believe every flight was a chance.